This one goes as follows. A tenant was given notice and started removing items from the said property. We are aware that now there's currently no one residing at the property, but they've been unable to get a hold of the tenant for over a week for the keys. And then the question becomes, when are we legally allowed to take back possession of the property? So yeah, Bruno?
It's always a very difficult question, and Nick and I were discussing this, and we discussed this a couple of times, right? So when is a property actually empty? When is a tenant not in possession of the property? Or in other words, when has a property been abandoned? Now, I mean, if there was a clear definition of the word abandonment, then it's very, very easy, because our common law, the Rental Housing Act, supports the fact that if a property has been abandoned, a landlord can take charge of it or possession of it again, right? So the law is clear on when a landlord is allowed to take possession of the property. The problem comes in where, what is abandonment? When is a tenant no longer residing on the property? So residing on the property or leasing the property or staying in control of the property in terms of a lease has been defined in our law in a number of different ways. And the reality is that if somebody, say, for example, goes overseas on a 3-month business trip, the mere fact that he's not at the property does not mean that he's not in possession or control over the property. And, this has seeped down into our law of spoliation, evictions, you name it. The reality is that there's a huge contrast or difference between physical occupation and actual occupational possession. So now it goes back down to the question of, in these specific circumstances, no one is residing there. And if I recall correctly from the question, let me have a look again, started removing items from the property. So the tenant was given notice and started removing items from the property. And we are aware that no one is residing at the property, but we can't get hold of the tenant. So obviously the wording of the question, it does create some level of ambiguity, because in my understanding, so he was given notice. So was that a week ago? He started removing. Did he remove, and then after that he stopped removing the assets? Because I suppose it comes down to intuition. What assets are remaining on the property? Is it possible to see or check? You gave notice, the tenant conducted himself in accordance with that notice, removed certain things, but left certain things behind. It does come down to that interpretation. Unfortunately, a landlord or an agent can't be judge, jury, and executioner, so be very, very careful. The safe answer is no, he hasn't. Technically, you need to evict him. Or, for example, if he owes money, you could potentially have the sheriff attach the goods and sell them, right? And that's the legal answer. So that's what I'll tell you as the cautionary answer that will not get you into any trouble. But no one wants to hear that answer, because me telling you that you need to evict a tenant that only has an old mattress sitting on the property wouldn't make sense. If it's an old mattress, maybe there's a justification to go inside and say, look, it's an old mattress. He's left. He hasn't been contacted in a week. He took all his main belongings in one day and he was out of here. There's a very intuition tells me that it's been abandoned. Follow a logical process. So I would, for example, in those instances, check the property, do an inspection. Maybe you're assuming that he left. Do an inspection over the property, but take impartial people with you. Let these impartial people do an inventory of the assets that are in the property. Try contact the tenant, maybe leave the property for a week, or if you have to remove the assets, do so in a very, very orderly fashion where they get placed in some sort of safe storage locker or whatever the case is, or at least they get inventorized and placed safely somewhere. Try give notice again, formal written notice, asking the tenant to please come in contact with you and retrieve the items. In that way, you can at least clear the property, and you can give the tenant notice. Depending on what the items are would depend on how you later deal with them. That's always a difficult one. I always try and convince my landlords to maybe try to sell them in execution if they are worth it, and if they're not, and the tenant doesn't respond, then you dispose of them having warned the tenant of this. And sometimes storage costs quickly eat up the value of those items, as also very easily, if there's a reasonable storage cost, at some point that would exceed the value, and you can dispose of the assets with very little qualm. But yeah, I don't know, Nick, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think you hit it on the head. Nail on the head. It's always a difficult question because the mere fact that you remove something out of a premises is not an indicator that someone's abandoned a property. Neither is the fact that they aren't there today. Neither is an indicator. So it's really a subjective inquiry. It depends on the circumstances. And you're exactly right. It's an assessment of really the best way to assess it is, well, what's left on the property? I always say to my clients, and I think you'll do the same, Bruno's, well, if there's something of significant value sitting on that property, it's unlikely that it's going to be abandoned.
Exactly.
Old mattress, probably, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Remember, that's still not an indicator. But if someone leaves their, flat screen TV in a property, you can be pretty sure that at that point you need to start evicting them.
And it's a element of risk, I suppose. If it's an old mattress, yes, spoliation, they come back and they try to get possession again. But it's an old mattress, and the longer he's away from the property, the less likely it is that somebody's going to believe that he was in actual control of it. And worst case scenario, you throw away the mattress after giving notice, and somebody comes and sues you for an old mattress because you've taken proper inventory. What's really the cost of that? Whereas a big screen TV, a car, something along those lines, your risk is materially more. So it comes down to intuition.
Yeah. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for covering that second. And that is our last question for today. And thank you very much, all our viewers. We'll be seeing everybody again in 2 weeks' time.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.